We are back on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio, News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, and now in New Mexico on KKIM. Our next guest is an old friend of the show, Brian Johnston, the Regional Director of the National Right for Life, and he's also the Director of Life Fest. Brian, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Well, it's good to be back with you, Marty and Clay.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure. So I wanted to start off talking about something that I think I saw you mention in Facebook about the election. You were talking about the layoffs in the last 48 hours? Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, the layoffs, huh? That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And that was the second item. I'm sorry. Obviously, are you referring kind of tongue-in-cheek to the layoffs of certain legislators, or are you referring to literally the layoffs that now that we know Obamacare is going into effect?
That's the one.
Yeah. Well, that's true. There's no doubt about that, and it's objectively true. And a lot of my, let's say, the people on the other side of the coin on Facebook were very upset with me.
I noticed that.
and I just had to point out that I'm just talking about objective facts. And the reality is that Obamacare is a tax. In fact, that's literally the only way it passed the Supreme Court. It is a tax, and it's a tax on the consumer. And these people think, no, it's the rich that are going to pay. No, it's not. It's gonna be people like you and I. It's going to push the way it's set up, and it's already happening. Employers cannot afford this more odious tax. It's going to push now them to say, look, you can get your insurance, but you're going to have to get it through this new pools, the insurance pools the federal government set up. And it's going to push people into this. So while it was said initially you're going to keep your doctor, that ultimately is not what's going to happen, because it's changing the entire nature of the healthcare system. This isn't just, let's give healthcare to some poor people who couldn't afford it. Obamacare has taken over 1/6 of the entire economy. That is the medical care industry, and it's your care. And literally, remember when we talk about medical care, it's medical care of your body. And what that means is if your body ceases to function, you die. We're talking about life. Your very life is now in the hands of the federal government. If you recall, and some people, again, were excoriated for pointing out these facts, the reality is that there are indeed panels that will determine if you get care or not. It will not be your doctor. All the talk about, you'll keep your own doctor. Oh, your doctor will decide. No. The reality is that with Obamacare, it's going to be some person in some other room that has nothing to do with you, that only cares about how much money the government's going to spend, and they will decide if you live or die. And that was nicknamed the death panel.
Brian, on January 1 of 2014, that's when senior abortions start taking place.
Senior abortions, that's a good way of putting it. That's a great
death
way
panels.
Of putting it. Yeah, because that's exactly what it's going to be. You know, I can remember years ago debating a gentleman on the abortion issue, and I can't remember his name. He was an attorney in Los Angeles. This is going back about 20 years, Brian, when you and I first met. And his argument was there's a certain, not really a gene, but there's a certain chemical that babies don't have until they're like a year or two old. So he had no problem with aborting people to the age of 1. The interesting thing is that particular chemical, seniors lose at a rapid rate when they hit about 80, 85. So, in effect, it is abortion for seniors. So,
yeah, I hadn't heard that argument, but it's clear. What's very clear, and it is, if there is no right to life, and I think we have to recognize what the right to life movement is about. In 1973, our Constitution was fundamentally changed. Our nation was fundamentally changed. A lot of people didn't understand that, but in essence, the right to life as a legal principle ceased to exist. And you can use all sorts of reasoning. You can use scientific terms, or certain, as Peter Singer back east at Princeton, he uses cognizance. And there's all sorts of fancy polysyllabic words you can use. But here's the bottom line. Other people will decide if you live or die. And the whole purpose of society, the purpose of law and society, is that those who cannot protect themselves be protected by the law. The innocent need protection if we're going to live in society. If we have lost the right to life, if now the law of the jungle, if you're strong enough to take another life and they can't resist you and it's okay, we have ceased to exist in a civilized society. And that's what's at stake. And exactly right, Clay. People are going to see that personally starting in 2014, and we're going to hear a lot more stories. And sadly, a lot of people wake up, but there's going to be very little we can do about it legally then. So there's other things that we can do, but this is an ominous situation, and with this ominous cloud that's come over our culture, it is disappointing. We're not giving up, though.
You know, Brian, when money gets tight, one of the things that they're going to be cutting is health care. And a prime example of that just took place in California is the elimination of healthy families and rolling all these kids to Medi-Cal. And then doctors are not going to be seeing Medi-Cal patients in the future.
We're having a conversation with Brian Johnston, the regional director for the National Right to Life. So, yeah, I agree with both of you. I mean, and you put it excellent, Brian. It's the law of the jungle, and it's unfortunate. Before we get away from Obamacare, how is Obamacare going to affect the abortion issue?
Well, the Obamacare now includes abortion. Up until this point, the federal government did not have anything to do with abortion. Again, historically, the way our nation was set up is that before 73, literally every state had laws regarding abortion. And every state recognized that, this is a human life in there somewhere. We better give some kind of respect. Even here in California, one of the more liberal states in 71, it did pass a law allowing abortions, but only in the cases of rape, incest, life of the mother, and severe fetal deformity. That was the typical litany, we've heard. And only before the 20th week. After that, that baby had protection under the law. But in 73, not only did California's laws and Texas laws, which was at stake before the Supreme Court, in Roe v. Wade, literally every state could no longer protect that baby in 73. The federal government, however, because of the Hyde Amendment, and many listeners will remember the Hyde Amendment said the federal government is not going to pay for any of these killings, and that has been the law of the land. What Obamacare does is, nope, the federal government is now in the abortion business. And what that means, if you look at California again as an example, California has the highest rate of abortion in the whole nation. And yes, we have the highest population. But no, I said the highest rate of abortion. We have double the per capita rate of abortion in California. Literally, even with our large population, we have double the per capita rate. There's more abortions done in California than anywhere else in the nation. And it's because the government of the state of California pays for it. Now the federal government's going to be paying for it over Obamacare. We're only going to get more abortions. When you pay for something with the government, you get more of it.
Well, maybe with the passage of Proposition 30 and the increased taxes for education, so we can support education, we can train these people about what abortion is and how to eliminate having a baby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Oh, you don't think that'll work?
It's really for education, Clay, and that's pretty good.
Yeah. A little bit of sarcasm there on Clay's part, I think.
No, I'm serious. I think Proposition 13 was a great thing. I mean, 30.
Yeah. And if any second now, the ceiling's going to open up and Clay will be gone.
You know, Brian, on another issue, or on a similar issue, but yesterday in Bakersfield, McDonald's laid off a bunch of people, and then they also cut hours back on a bunch of people so they won't qualify for health benefits.
Yeah. No, and so those people, and that's what we're going to see, that is the nature of Obamacare. The way it is structured just like in other idyllic cultures, and we've seen this in times past. We saw this in the Soviet Union, which was an idyllic society that they're bringing to pass, and then all of the Warsaw Pact countries, wherever socialism was morphing into really sharing the wealth. In fact, that meant the government had to give you what you were going to get. People could have businesses. If you know emigres from the old Eastern Bloc, you could actually own a business then. But you couldn't go very far with it, and most people just ended up being wards of the state. That's what's happening, as you said just yesterday in Kern County, and that's what's going to be happening in our nation, is that people will be pushed into being utter dependent on the state.
But they can go to the exchange, the California exchange, and make up to $92,000 a year and get subsidized by the government. So why would anybody not want to get health care from the government, except they won't get any care or treatment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Insane. Well, when we come back from the break, I want to talk about Life Fest, but before we come back from the break, excuse me, first thing I'd like to talk about briefly how you think the pro-life issue was affected by the election we just went through. So let's talk about that when we come back. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio, News Talk, 1180.